Structuralism is one of the linguistic theories of literature. It is also one of the text-only theories of literature. Like formalism, it focuses its attention on the language of the text, which it analyzes in order to determine its meaning. You can say that structuralism pays attention to the structures of literary text. But we do not always see a distinction between structure and form. So structuralism pays attention to the language of literary text, that's to the form and structure of literary text. It is in structuralism that we see the relationship between language and literature, and the fact that you might need to be well-versed in language in order to interpret literature in certain ways. You might need to be well-versed in language in order to interpret literature in certain ways. In structuralism, language is defined as a system of signs and codes that has a semantic value. In structuralism, language is defined as a system of signs and codes, C-O-D-E-S, that has a semantic value. Structuralism flourished in the 1960s. Structuralism flourished in the 1960s. It is an approach to literary interpretation. It's an approach to literary interpretation that utilizes the principles of structural linguistics. It is an approach to literary interpretation that utilizes the principles of structural linguistics. It is a language-based critique. It is a language-based critique. When I say critique, it is spelled this way. C-R-I-T-I-Q-U-E, critique. Can be used as a verb and as a noun. It's a language-based critique as a noun that utilizes tools drawn from structural linguistics to interpret literature. And we emphasize literature because we are actually talking about literary theories. But it's important for you to note that structuralism is also a theory that can explain life generally. Structuralism is a theory that can explain life generally. Okay? So if you want to see how this works, I wrote an essay on my website entitled The Structuralism of Everything. You can Google it, The Structuralism of Everything. If you want to see how structuralism works as a theory of life, you can Google the structuralism of everything. It's there on my website, so you can read. But we are paying attention, we are emphasizing the use of structuralism as a theory in literature. Like formalism, structuralism aims to be a scientific theory. Those who believe in structuralist principles say that it is scientific in nature, just like formalism, because it is evidence-based, it is systematic, and those who follow the procedure usually arrive at the same meaning, the same interpretation. It is important to note that structuralism is anchored on Ferdinand de Saussure's structural linguistics. Anchored on Ferdinand de Saussure's structural linguistics. Ferdinand de Saussure's structural linguistics. He was a Swiss linguist. Whose theory revolutionized language, giving it a new perspective and a new direction from what it was known before him. In pre-Saussurean linguistics, language was viewed as mimetic. Language was viewed as mimetic, meaning that language mirrored the external world. Language was mimetic, means that language mirrors the external world. In the mimetic theory of language, language mirrors the structure of the world. Language mirrors the structure of the world. Hence, words are symbols for things in the world. Hence, words are symbols for things in the world. Hence, words are symbols for things in the world. Each word has a reference. Each word has a reference. Each word has a reference, which is the object or concept or idea it interprets. So, for you to have an understanding of what is said, you need to be able to link the word to its reference in the external world. All right? For you to understand what is said, you need to be able to link the word or the symbol to its reference in the external world. That's how meaning is realized. That's why in primary school, the teacher will say pen, phone, okay, paper. All right, because the teacher is trying to make you have a reference for the symbol of what is said. That's how meaning is arrived. That's how a meaning is communicated. Okay? Imagine if the teacher has said pen, phone. All right? Then it would have been wonderful. You would have said, you would have been saying, bring that phone, let me write. Let me write my essay. Okay? And bring the pen, let me call my mom. Okay? So, in pre-structural linguistics, symbol or word is equal to a thing in the real world. Symbol or word is equal to a thing in the real world. That's how you were taught. So, anytime you say that you don't have an idea, what it means that you don't have a reference for what has been said. They ask you a question, you say, no idea. That means you cannot link it to something, to a particular reference. Alright? And if you don't understand a word, that means you can't link it to a reference in the external world. It doesn't make sense to you. Okay? That's how it works. So, at this point in pre-structural linguistics, language was diachronic. Especially in philology, which was the science of language. So the diachronic approach was used in the study of language. The diachronic approach studies language. The diachronic approach studies language based on its development over a period of time in history. The diachronic approach to the study of language studies language based on its development through different periods in history. For instance, if you want to understand a particular word, then you have to go back in time to trace the meaning of that word to what it means currently. That's a diachronic approach to the study of language. The diachronic approach to the study of language studies language based on its development through different periods in history. So you should note that in structural linguistics, we make use of the synchronic approach to the study of language. Use of the synchronic approach to the study of language. And the synchronic approach to the study of language was gifted us by Fernand de Saussure. He lived between 1857 and 1913. He lived between 1857 and 1913. He lived between 1857 and 1913. His ideas on structural linguistics are contained in a posthumously published work. His ideas on structural linguistics are contained in a posthumously published work, excuse me, entitled Course in General Linguistics. Entitled Course in General Linguistics. Course in General Linguistics. You underline the title of the text, as usual. The work is posthumous because it was published after his death. The work is said to be posthumous if it is published after the death of the author. Literally, after the author had died. The work is posthumous if it is published after the death of the author. So, after Saussure had died, his students compiled his works, all his lecture notes. The students compiled his lecture notes and published them. All right? Those were when students were students. The student compiled his lecture notes and published them. This publication questioned previously held ideas about language. This publication questioned previously held ideas on language. In this publication, Saussure offers a synchronic approach to the study of language, abandoning the diachronic approach to the study of language. In this publication, Saussure offers us a synchronic approach to the study of language, rather than a diachronic approach that was used before his time. The synchronic approach to the study of language studies language at a particular time or a single moment. Language at its current state. Language as it is at the moment. The synchronic approach to the study of language studies language at a particular time or a single moment. It does not seek to study how words and grammatical structures develop over time. The synchronic approach does not seek to study how words and grammatical structures developed over time, which is what the diachronic approach did. Rather, it focuses attention on how words and grammatical structures function at the particular moment in time. So that is the difference between the diachronic approach and the synchronic approach to the study of language. The synchronic approach does not seek to study how words and grammatical structures develop over time, but rather it studies how they function at the particular moment. Social also rejects the mimetic view of language. Social also rejects the mimetic view of language. In other words, it rejects the idea that language mimics the structure of the external world. Social rejects the idea that language mimics the structures of the external world. Rather, social believed that language has its own structure, independent of the external world. Language has its own structure. So when we say that, when in structuralism we say that literature is seen to be independent, is organically whole, we are taking the idea from social's interpretation of language. All right? Because what happens in structuralism is that we take ideas from structuralism, from the linguistic theory, and then apply it to our understanding of literature. That's how it works. We simply draw tools from structuralism, from structural linguistics, and use those tools to make sense of the literary work. So you can see that structuralism is interdisciplinary, just as criticism is. So it rejects the idea that language is mimetic, meaning that it mimics the structures of the external world. Rather, he claims that language has its own internal structure that makes it independent of the external world. Language has its own internal structure that makes it independent of the internal world, and that language is made up of a system of rules or codes. Language does not only have structure, but the fact that it has structure means that it is regulated. It's highly regulated. And if it is regulated, that means that it has its own rules. It's regulated, means that language has its own rules. So language is highly structured, highly organized. That is why all elements of language are organized in the hierarchy from the smallest to the highest. And they are all interwoven, related in arriving at meaning, in making sense of what is being said. For instance, in studying language, you have to pay attention to the levels of linguistic analysis. You have to pay attention to the levels of linguistic analysis. Say phonology or phonetics, say morphology, say syntax, and say semantics. Okay? Say phonetics or phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics. And each of these levels needs to be understood in relation to the other levels for meaning to come about. For instance, if I make an utterance and you do not understand the phonetics, the sound system that I'm using, it will be very difficult for you to understand the meaning. Because phonetics is the first level of understanding. Or if I write a letter and one of the letters is not clear, it might disrupt the meaning of the entire word and you will not be able to understand. So that one single letter can disrupt or change the meaning of a particular word. All right? So if you, for instance, say this, and then maybe you wanted to write this, but somehow you write this, the meaning of this utterance will change because of the single change of that one letter. Okay, and so you can continue like that. Okay. And so on and so forth. So in phonetics, for instance, the phoneme is the smallest meaningful sound in the language. The phoneme is the smallest meaningful sound in the language. And it is the basic building block of the language. It is the basic building block of the language. The phoneme is the smallest meaningful sound in the language. It is the basic building block of the language. So the same phoneme can be pronounced differently depending on the environment. One phoneme can be pronounced differently depending on the environment. One phoneme can be pronounced differently depending on the environment. For instance, the voiceless bilabial plosive, in pen is different from how it is pronounced. The voiceless bilabial plosive in pen is different from how it is pronounced in Spanish. And a difference noted in the pronunciation of this phoneme, that slight difference is called allophone. It's called allophone. It's called allophone. We are told that the organization or arrangement of phonemes is rule governed. Is rule governed. Is rule governed. Is rule governed. And this is how we are going to view other levels, items in other categories and other levels of linguistic analysis. That is why at morphology or syntax or semantics. They are all constrained by rules. Okay? So, because at the level of morphology, you have the morpheme. At the morphology, you have the morpheme. Excuse me. At the level of morphology, you have the morpheme, which is the smallest part of a word that has lexical or grammatical significance. At the level of morphology, you have the morpheme, which is the smallest part of a word that has lexical or grammatical significance. For instance, the AR in teacher is a morpheme. Because it has a grammatical significance. It has a lexical significance in the word teacher. And there also you have allomorphs. You have allomorphs. You have allomorphs. Which are slight variations in the realization of morphemes. Which are slight variations in the realization of morphemes. Allomorphs are slight variations in the pronunciation. By pronunciation, we mean realization. The realization of morphemes. For instance, the morphemes can have allomorphic references like this, this, and this. Okay, it's the same morpheme, but they have slight variation depending on the environment that they occur. All right? For instance, if you say book, and then you add the morpheme S, and when you say crabs, and then you add the S, the pronunciation here is S, while the one here is Z. Right? Yes. So you also have that. If for instance you add this, then this morpheme will then be pronounced as what? This. Okay. It also works with the morpheme D when you are forming past tense of regular verbs. You're forming past tense of regular verbs. Their pronunciation also depend on the environment in which they occur. All right? because this can be pronounced as t, can be pronounced as t, and can be pronounced as it. So let's take this as a verb. We take this as a verb, and then we now write this. Remember, the morpheme here is the. How you pronounce it is t. So it's booked, booked, because it finds itself in a voiceless environment. It's booked, not booked. Okay. If it occurs in a voice environment, then it is t. Okay. If you have an environment like wanted, then it is wanted, not wanted. Okay. Now let's look at lang and parole. Lang and parole. Lang and parole. Or la lang and la parole. Lang and parole. Lang and parole. So lang refers to the social aspects of language. Lang refers to the social aspects of language. And the overall system of language. It is the overall system of language. The social aspects of language and the overall system of language. We can also use it to refer to the rules. To the rules internalized or innately acquired by a speaker. Rules internalized or innately acquired by a speaker. Whereas parole is the actual speech or utterances or writing which is a manifestation of lang. Which is a manifestation of lang. So it can be seen that lang is ideal or perfect. Lang is ideal or perfect, while parole is real and imperfect. It's real and imperfect. Of course, the rule of the language is usually there, but when you finally speak it, we notice some blemishes. So in parole, we find a deviation from lang, because maybe the person is not well trained in the language, or maybe the person is not well exposed in the language. And so parole always aims to be like lang, but with shortcomings. Because lang is the rule, it is perfect. Parole is the actual speech event. Parole is likely to be imperfect. Lang will always be perfect. What you need to know is that lang implies the rules that govern the language. And that it is from these rules that paroles are generated. So we can have one lang and use it to generate many instances of parole. We can have one lang and use it to generate many instances of parole. For instance, if you say NP is equal to N NP is equal to plus N. Meaning noun phrase is equal to determiner plus noun. This is the rule. Okay? So this is lang. We can use this to generate many different instances of parole. Like the man, the house, a girl, okay, and so on and so forth. So all of these are parole. The rule remains the same. Any structuralist analysis is based on lang. Any structuralist analysis is based on lang. It is also an attempt to explain lang. That's what your language teachers have been doing. It's an attempt to explain lang, tell you the rules of the language, or the system of rules of the language. Lang is the system of rules of the language. And as I've said, a particular lang can be used to generate many instances of parole. So the attempt to explain a parole or analyze a parole takes us back to lang. And if you can determine the lang in a parole, then you are a structuralist. And this is how structuralism works in literature. Okay? So for instance, someone says, the hunter killed the lion. That is a parole. You are, as a structuralist, if you are to analyze that sentence, we need you to give us the lang. Once you give us the lang, then you have been able to account for the rules that operate, the rules that make that sentence possible. And you are a structural linguist at that point. So the hunter killed the lion. You can say it's a simple sentence. You can say it's a statement. You can say it's a simple sentence. You can say it's a statement. That's if you're analyzing it based on structure, you can say it's a simple sentence. If you are analyzing it based on function, you can say it's a statement. As a declarative sentence. And then you go on to describe the constituent parts. The sentence has a determiner. Okay, you can identify the subject first, which is the hunter. The hunter is the noun phrase, and it's made up of a determiner and a noun, which is hunter, which is the head of the nominal group. And then you move on to the verbal group. You have the killed, which is in past tense, a main verb in past tense. And then what remains is the object of the sentence, the direct object of the sentence, which is the lion, which is also a noun phrase that has lion as the head and there as the determiner, as the pre-modifier. And so the sentence structure will be subject, verb, and object. Now, once you find that lang, you can use it to generate more of such expressions. Okay? So this is how it works in literature. Let me explain how lang and paro works in literature. In literature, we believe that the work of art has its own internal rules. And these rules are called lang. It is what makes the work of art that you see possible. It's what accounts for individual work of art, which is paro. And so, the structuralist analysis of a work of art is to determine the rules that operate across literary works of similar genres or of the same type. Once we find the rules, each time we find the individual work, we can use that rule to determine its meaning. Okay, take for instance sonnets. The sonnet. Take for instance the sonnet. The sonnet operates based on certain rules. The structuralism of the sonnet is that it has to be a poem of 14 lines. I'm talking about the lang now. It has to be a poem of 14 lines, written in iambic pentameter. Talks about love. Okay? Has a certain rhyme scheme depending on its tradition. Once you know the rule, when you see a sonnet, you can use the rule to apply. Or you can study different sonnets to determine the rules that cut across them. That's how structuralism operates in literature, where literary works are studied based on the rules or the principles that operate in them. All right, so we'll pause there for now and then switch to the other class.